Welcome to Rising Tide Startups, where today's most exciting solopreneurs share their startup stories. They also deliver tangible strategies that they would implement personally if starting their business over today. Each episode is a startup masterclass. Make sure you take notes. Take it away, Kevin.
This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups, and my guest today is Brian Fritton. Brian, thanks for joining us.
Thanks a ton for having me, Kevin.
So we've chatted just for a moment here before you hit the record button, and we both were lamenting the fact that we started out the day with rain. So maybe the day is going to brighten up and head into a sunny weekend. But Brian, share a little bit about yourself with our listeners.
I like your hope in the gray fall of winter, gray fall of Chicago.
Eternal optimist.
Yep. So I'm a software engineer by trade. Worked on both sides of that, job in consulting, so building websites for bigger brands, and then on the product side as well. So got to work on some pretty cool products throughout my career. Worked for a larger search engine who had lost the war to Google, but had amassed a pretty nice war chest, and was building marketing and advertising products at the time. So I had to build some pretty cool high volume APIs and different tech tools that were really interesting. And then the entrepreneurial bug bit me, and I went out to Los Angeles, where the 72 and sunny sounds really good right about now. I went out to Los Angeles because we raised some funding for a real estate crowdfunding company that I helped my brother start, called Patch of Land. So we were taking these fix and flip types of houses and raising money to help borrowers purchase and rehab them, a couple $1,000s at a time, and allowing normal folks to be able to actually participate in that investment. Mm-hmm. And had a great time doing that. Raised a few more rounds of funding, had a successful exit from the business, and came back here. And I always had a very particular interest in security. I was always the kid, where I learned how to pick locks really early as a kid, right? Which much to my parents' dismay has continued on. My parents were always unable to go into the next room without typing a code on a cardboard code pad that I had, drawn in crayon and stuff, so it was always in my blood, but never held a specific security role. But after, coming back to Chicago and taking a role as the VP of engineering for a data science company here in Chicago, and getting put in charge of cybersecurity in front of the 2018 midterm elections, it became pretty important to me that, I learned how to build a cybersecurity program to protect ourselves, because right. At that time, we were hosting about 9 out of every 10 political campaigns strategy hubs in our software.
Wow.
So I was kind of the guy in the hot seat responsible for defending them from attacks. And
so that's where all those emails were.
Yeah.
That's no closet behind you where the server is. That's
no comment. So yeah, I mean, that's where the idea for my current company came from. And man, I just really enjoy the protecting other founders, protecting business owners thing. That's really been my mission through a lot of what I've been trying to do. But yeah, coder gone CEO for the first time, I suppose I would say.
So I'm going to ask you a really crazy question. I hear this term just bantered around in so many different environments and conversations. So when I hear the term software engineer, that seems like almost an umbrella term for so many things that could fall under that. But what's the distinction of a software engineer versus an app developer versus a web developer? I mean, what are the differentiations of those terms?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think like lots of people have different shades of gray answers here. The thing that makes someone an engineer to me, and I must have hired at least 100 software engineers or developer types or relevant product folks throughout my career so far. And I think the difference between someone you'd call a programmer or a coder and a software engineer, to me, is they think through the system as a whole, and it's everything from the planning and alternative considerations, the buy or build decisions and discussions, the architecture there at hand, and then all of the stuff you need to do to support it. So thinking about the infrastructure, the security implications, and programmers, I think, are the folks who get given a ticket and they go, okay,
Go build it.
it's very specific language.
Yeah.
Go put fingers on keyboard, and they're great, right? But like, if you want to be an engineer, it's a much more holistic job, I would say.
That's a great way to kind of differentiate between those terms. And it's interesting. When you talk about security, I had another interview in a related field earlier this week, and the thing that came to mind was this like cosmic whack-a-mole, of security, because it's like there's new threats popping up constantly. It's like this quantum exponential, machine that's always you feel like it's always out ahead of you. You're trying to catch up to it. So how in the world do you even begin to get your mind or your systems around this, this virtually global threat?
Yeah, it absolutely is global, and it's feels like a bit of a cat and mouse game, doesn't it? So what I like to say first is you have to understand what you're trying to protect. And the context of all of this, the thing that a lot of people have to remember is that security is never done. Security is a process,
right?
You gotta do your books every month to stay in business, and your taxes every quarter and every year, right? Same thing, and how those laws and those regulations and those ways of doing things change as you grow, and the environment changes too. Same with security, and so the first place that I like to say people should start is think about what you actually have to protect. Are you a small clinic, a doctor's office, a dentist office? Are you a software provider who holds a bunch of credit card information? Are you holding government secrets, right? Like whatever it might be, you have to think about where that data is, what it is, and scenario out what professionals would call a threat model.
Right.
And it's really just a fancy way of saying, what's your data, where is it, and who would want it, and how might they get it, and then to prioritize the impacts that you would feel or your customers would feel should that data be manipulated or exposed or used against those people. And then what's the likelihood of that happening, right? And that'll help you frame where your attention should be.
Right.
And there's great posts out there, happy to send them later for the show notes too, that can say, for most businesses, here's some foundational things you should do, right? Enable multi-factor authentication on everything that has it. Ransomware is huge right now. Make sure that you've got backups and you know how to recover from them. Train your staff, right? Training and the human element is huge right now. You have all these technical protections in place and know exactly where your data is and who you want to protect it from and what technical vulnerabilities they might use. But if Steve down the row clicks on the wrong email link, then it's all for bust.
Right. Yeah. I it's really interesting to see some of these videos online where scammers are trying to get information out of people, but they called the wrong people, and they end up the person they called ends up hacking into their computer and shutting it down or locking it up. And I'm thinking, that is cosmic karma right there. that just happens. But
all comes back around.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, the name of the show is Rising Tide Startups, and we talked just a minute before we hit the record button that we would really like to kind of drill down just on the story, of Havoc Shield and how it was born. And it seems like I either read somewhere or heard on an interview that this was kind of created out of your own need. Was that true? Talk about the kind of the genesis of Havoc Shield.
Yeah. So as I said, I've always sort of had this attachment to security, but never held a specific role in it, right? I was never a security engineer or an analyst or anything like that. I was a small company CTO, owner of an independent website design company before that, VP of engineering, what I like to call security stewards. And, these people, like all of us in smaller organizations who own and have the keys to the castle in certain ways, are put in the hot seat of having to defend against attacks. And the reality of it, that that really struck home for me in deciding to start Havoc Shield is if you look at any one of like the reputable studies out there, the amount, the volume of attacks against small businesses, so companies with less than 250 employees, is just as high as your larger counterparts. So 50% or plus of all attacks are performed against folks like us, and that is only accelerating. It's only accelerating because attackers can use pretty freely available, easy to use tools to just kind of spray and pray and see what comes back as new vulnerabilities, and then target you if they can see something vulnerable on the technology you use or the people inside your company or whatever that might be, and they can successfully breach 10 of you in the time where they might be able to take one larger person down, right? And so I've always had like a desire to protect other people, and obviously been a serial entrepreneur for a while, so have a big place in my heart for founders and people who take the risk and make these investments. And the reality is, if you do get successfully attacked, the impacts of that are huge, right? Like reputationally, financially, and to the effect that there's a stat out there that says 60% of businesses who are successfully attacked, meaning you get breached, don't come back from it, right?
Wow.
You got business.
That's incredible.
So our mission is to protect other founders, and I take that really seriously. But that last job that I was mentioning with that data science company, what a great incentive to build a strong cybersecurity presence, defend our ability to vote and campaigns to participate in the democratic process and all that sort of good stuff from attacks. So that was a big reason, but also we were losing money. So I was the guy, the technical executive in the room trying to convince our customers that we had done enough to win their business. And you see a lot of companies, not just large ones anymore, making their vendors go through a level of effort and security that they've not ever seen before, because they correctly see small businesses as threat vectors, right? Like the Target hack of a couple of years ago, the one that exposed a ton of credit card numbers, that happened because they identified a small HVAC contractor who had network access to be able to kind of control things remotely in the stores. They hacked the HVAC company, and then they were in Target's network, and then they went from there, right? And so, your customers, your partners, especially if you sell to larger businesses, are gonna, if they're not already, ask you for new security efforts, and so it's a revenue problem too. And when I went out to search for how do you start to solve this, who do we hire, I found a couple things. I found, one, complex frameworks of how you prioritize these things, how you project manage them, that are really just built for larger companies. And for folks like us, they read like Latin, right? And so that didn't give me anything I could start from. The second thing I found was like hundreds of noisy point solutions that are like expensive and configured in 50 different ways, 50 different places, 50 different people, and they're all trying to represent themselves as the next thing you should buy and do, even though really in reality it's not. And then when I go, lastly, who can help me at this, right? I don't have the level of expertise. Can I get a security hire in the doors? Wow. The 3.5 million person cybersecurity job gap globally. And if you want one and you can find one, you probably can't afford them.
You said 3.5 million?
Yep, globally. So there's this huge talent gap for security professionals. And, bigger companies are paying these folks 250 grand plus to start. And, great career to go into, by the way. But a small business trying to get a hold of one of those, or get a hold of a contractor to help even temporarily, those folks are booked out months in advance. And these people need help now. So we built a SaaS product that kind of is like what TurboTax did for complicated tax prep. We take the ocean of complexity that is cybersecurity planning, your vendors, configuration, compliance, and policies, and we bake it into a step-by-step action plan that your director of operations, your IT provider, you and I can follow to produce a professional program.
That is incredible. I am newly appointed the agent of a friend of mine who's in the kind of cybersecurity space, and we've agreed he'll start for 200,000. So
Yeah.
he'll start cheap. So, but I need a broker's fee to make that connection happen for you.
Yep.
But
There you go.
yeah, man, that is such an incredible space, and with that labor gap, and I mean just the cost. I mean, you're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, like catch 22 with needing to hire people to that have some semblance of experience or ability or education or whatever in that space, and then not being able to afford them. So
Yep.
if we have that gap and the need is not getting less, it's getting more. It's
Yep.
actually increasing. So walk through this kind of so Havoc Shield was started what year?
2019, middle of 2019, I sort of saw the writing on the wall after talking to CTOs, VPs of engineering, other folks in my network, and decided to do the entrepreneurial thing and quit the job and
Jump in and
try to
start.
get going on it.
You've made amazing progress in less than 2 years. I mean, so you've gone through kind of a tech incubator to get to the point that you are. Which one were you in?
Yeah, I went through Techstars. Great experience.
Yeah, and that really kind of kickstarted your progress and your heading to scale.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so at that point, I wasn't a first time founder, but it was still immensely helpful. So we got accepted into that. We started the 3-month period with Techstars at the beginning of 2020, and I had wanted to launch a version of the product so as we went into that, so we could focus on go to market, right? Like how we're going to find our customers, who those folks are, and how to reach them. And we were able to do that and experiment with that. And Accelerator was super helpful in a couple of ways. One was they do this thing called Mentor Madness, and it's this week, and it expands through the rest of the program and after, but it's this week of just meeting these really high-powered, impressive people who are all there to help you. All right, people who have built tons of companies, had multi-million-dollar exits, but all over the sphere too. It's not just like venture-backed tech companies. It's
right.
People who have had success in larger organizations, in service organizations, whatever that might be. They do a good job of curating those mentors for you too. And so while in Techstars and afterwards, I left with just this immense cadre of mentors who don't want anything from you other than to help. And then the other thing is like they produce a playbook of how to go about evaluating and building your business at the very, very early stage, and it works, right? They teach you how to do financial modeling and how to position your company and what positioning is and how that affects messaging and stuff. And then you leave with demo day. And our demo day is kind of interesting because this was during the whole first shutdown with COVID.
Yeah.
And so we all went home, and they did a virtual demo day, and it actually ended up being all right for us because there was a wider distribution and interest in security, but pretty stressful knowing that you're talking to the whole world rather than just Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
So what are some of the things that if you look back now between say 2019 and now, that if you knew those things in 2019, it would have made kind of this initial first couple of years much easier, or you would have scaled more quickly or had less bumps in the road? What are one or two things that really kind of stand out?
Yeah. One is, and we did a good bit of this, but I'll always say, like, you can never do enough, which is as you find problems that you believe are worth solving with a business, you got to get out of the building and talk to customers. And it can be conversations. It doesn't have to be this scientific method. And of course you can get a lot of help with having great conversations, and there's great resources out there, but like, you just got to get out of the building, buy people a coffee or a drink, and ask them, what problems do you have in the space, and try not to lead them into the solution you're thinking of. Like, a lot of us entrepreneurs want to fix, and they want to create and talk about the solution. but you're going to waste a lot of time if you don't have a must-solve problem in mind. And those conversations, I wish I would have done double as many as I did. That's one. And then the second thing is, coming especially from a technical track and being a bit of an introvert, and being more of the logic, math, and coding type. My strongest skills are not in marketing, go-to-market, sales, that kind of thing. And while I've grown there, I've seen the desire of a lot of people who are similar to me, and just saying, like, build it and they will come, basically. And go to market, the way that you get your customers, the way that you find them, down to pricing, all that stuff is just as important as the product that you're selling at the end of the day. 50% of any business is go to market, right? You got to get them in the door, and you got to get the right people in the door. Otherwise, you're just wasting time.
Have the best product in the world, and if nobody's there to use it, buy it, or give feedback on it, it really just kind of sits on the shelf. And vice versa. You can have, sometimes an average product, but great, relationships and great sales team that kind of makes up for that. But so how's the product itself iterated since you first kind of, mapped that out and wireframed it on the whiteboard and said, okay, this is what we're going to build. And then, the product today, how different is that?
Yeah, we've been through a ton of iterations, especially with COVID. When we all went home, we were targeting sort of more Main Street businesses at the time before that, and those people still need a lot of help, but obviously their cash dried up fast, right? So we kind of pivoted and looked at more venture-backed startups and professional service organizations like financial advisors, mortgage brokers, folks like that. And so the catalog of modules for one that we had changed, and we introduced new things that folks in regulated industries need, right? So we had to tailor our catalog to make sure that they met those regulations, and so like that I'll call content within our product, right? Even though it's a lot more than just writing on the board, but there's that, and then that continues to change as we get pulled in more sophisticated demands of our clients, right? So we have to continue to lay runway in front of our clients, which is super fun. That's a great job that we get to do. Help companies continue to grow their program as their needs change and grow. The other thing is we have been, I think, happily surprised at the level of trust our customers have in us, and they want our opinion. And so, we started a while ago with, a lot of choose your own journey and more configuration on certain things. What we've moved to is we try to do a really nice and clean job asking you the right questions to give you the curated set of tools and protections and policies and things that'll bring lowered risk and higher value to your company through your program, but we opinionate it, and so we use our expertise, we use our backing and security expertise of our advisory board to bake in all of that, stepping on landmines and having to deal with attacks and all that stuff. We bake that into the product, and so our product has probably become more opinionated, kind of like how TurboTax kind of keeps you on the happy path, unless you have a big thing that you got to steer around. Right. We're happy to try to make it as simple as possible while still producing and baking in all that expertise.
I mean, TurboTax is such a great kind of metaphor example of what you're trying to do kind of in the security space, because, you're talking about, how you've pivoted since maybe the first idea that you had, but in some ways you have to iterate constantly because, regulations change and new rules are coming out every day that you have to adjust to, and market conditions and things like that. So it's never going to be static. If it is, it's probably going to be obsolete and stale very quickly. But that's different than Man, we just missed it. We thought this was our market, but actually this was our market. And have you noticed your market being a lot better defined than it
Yeah.
was when you first started in 2019?
Oh man, absolutely. So one of the mistakes we made in the early days was what I'll coin, like, not coin because it's a term out there, but what I call trying to drink the ocean. So we said, hey, we're a cybersecurity program for SMBs. Okay, what is an SMB? Right? Are we talking startups? We talking a yoga studio? Um, and what we really quickly learned as we tried to go and attract these people, with messaging on our website and outreach from our sales folks and ads and all that sort of good stuff, is if you're talking to everybody, you're talking to nobody. And so where we're at now is we actually narrow our audience to financial services. And so if you go on our website, it's all about cybersecurity for financial services companies. And we still get a good amount of businesses from real estate companies and tech startups and all over the place. Really interesting, fascinating companies. But right now we're focused on being perfect for financial services companies. It's all of our ads and our messaging and everything talk about the regulations they're subject to.
Yeah.
And even in our product, we adjusted our onboarding to talk about, in your financial services institution, what do you do? What kind of data do you have there? And, so it's a bit more curated there. And the reason is we can talk much more specifically and acutely to those types of folks and their types of problems. And we can articulate, what's in the product, towards that end. And then once we get good at that, and this is the process that we're in right now, once we get good at that, we build that playbook of how to talk their language and what it takes to do this. Then we can knock that bowling pin down and we can move to the next bowling pin, which is manufacturing or the legal industry. And we're going to do the same thing in one fit the time and one fit the cost. And man, I wish that we didn't spend a bit of time trying to do all of that. And we went after here because we'd be that much more time ahead on figuring this one out.
I got the perfect example. So my first job out of university, I worked for an insurance company in kind of the policy formation department. It was kind of a pseudo legal, area, but we worked in all 50 states. So there were constant changes in virtually every state. And so if we could have just focused on Texas or focused on Florida or something like that, it would have made our lives so much easier. And to be able to keep up with this constantly changing, landscape out there. But because we were so wide, it was whack-a-mole. I mean, it was like, it's like, which one is the most likely to blow up? So let's focus on that one, the highest risk area. And if you niche down in an area, it's much more easy to stay current and accurate and really own that market versus just kind of serving a portion of that. And I mean, I'm not surprised that has happened because I think so many successful companies, especially startups, I mean, they do start out wide and we'll take anybody that has a checkbook, and then start narrowing down.
And just as proof towards what you're saying there, don't have the concrete numbers in front of me, but the two phases, when we were broader versus just focusing on financial services, our cost to acquire a customer went way down. Our conversion rate went way up. The conversations that we were having in demos were tight, and so we're closing more business instead of wasting time on customers that weren't right for us. So it's a total stage change.
I mean, even like marketing and what conferences you want to attend and, events and things like that, and how you want to target specific niches and potential clients. I mean, if you're focused on one industry, it's much easier to kind of make those determinations. And you don't, I love the phrase you use, don't drink the ocean. I'd never heard before. So yeah, I've written that down. So do I have to give you credit if I ever use that again?
Yeah, that's someone else's. I can't take credit for that. I don't know who said that, but it's not mine.
What are some other lessons that you think, just kind of generically, that as people are starting businesses and they're hiring, they're growing, they're taking on new markets, they're kind of just walking through that kind of landmine of, the first 3 to 5 years of trying to get started, what are some just general principles you think are good to that would really help our audience?
Yeah, I think especially nowadays, one thing that's really helped us move with speed and quality, while being, a fully remote company, which I think, a lot of companies, if they, weren't already, they're transitioning into these remote companies.
Yeah.
And even if you aren't, it helps hugely is write, do more writing instead of getting people in a meeting. It'll concrete your thoughts, right? So if you got this, brainstorming topic or a couple of decisions to make, sit down and write it out, because it's going to help you navigate the context, the why, what your options are, who should be involved, so much more cleanly as you attempt to communicate it in writing. You don't have to be a good writer. It's just the process of doing it. And then what that enables too is you can send that to other folks, and they can on their schedule respond to you, and it creates this beautiful sort of asynchronicity where people can get their work done. They don't have to context switch because they have another meeting in 10 minutes, and then they can give you the attention that you need, and it's all there in writing, so everyone's concreting their thoughts. You get to decisions and you get to new ideas a lot faster, in my opinion. That's a
great point. But you're sure it's not just because you're an introvert. You just don't want to meet with people. You'd rather
still have some meetings.
That's right. Anything. I mean, you're completely your company is completely remote.
Yep. And
has been since it started, or is this a result of COVID?
It has been since it started. Take a lot of notes from if you know the company is Zapier.
Yep.
Yeah. So they've been a remote company since
Automatic.
They started Automatic.
Yeah.
And they all have similar guidance around writing and the asynchronous nature of work, things like that, and how beneficial it's been for them.
Yep, for sure. And we have to be, because it's not, it's no longer a US village, it's a global village. And, we have people all over the world that can serve these roles. And if there's this huge labor gap, I mean, you're going to have to look outside the borders of the, the 48 states here to find talent that can do the job and do it well. But there's so many things that we could just chase here. But is there anything, as we're wrapping up, is there anything we haven't really touched on that you would like to kind of wrap us up with, and then just tell people where the best place to find you online is, and maybe in that as well, maybe kind of identify who maybe the ideal client is for Havoc Shield?
Sure. So I'm going to give some free value here in my wrap up. The one thing I want to talk about is the level of impact you can have in protecting your reputation, your investment, your financial investment, your customers' information, your employees' information, with just a few small things. And you can't stop here. But if you've not done these things, go and do them today. Like, pause the episode and go and do them, then come back and listen, right? The first thing is MFA, multi-factor authentication. If you haven't enabled it on your email, on your bank login, on anything that offers it, which there's a lot more online that does nowadays, you got to go do it. It's worth the small inconvenience, because if your account gets taken over from a badly clicked on email, or you reused a password that you shouldn't have, or anything like that, it just makes it that much harder, because an attacker has to know that code too, and they probably won't. Second thing is think about the ability to be socially engineered at your business. There are lots of what I would call scam attacks just as often as technical types of things. And so you can think of, like, you've probably heard in the news about, companies wiring money to an attacker because, they masked themselves as an email at your supplier, right? And they did a little bit of work to determine who the right person inside your company is to pay the invoice. And, they sent a real invoice and a fake account number because they knew what you were buying for something off of Twitter, right? Like, think about the types of things that your you're saying online and the types of information that you're disclosing about the people inside your company. And then make sure that you have processes in place to verify, especially financial transactions, right? Are you out of band calling the person who should be approving or asked for that wire to be sent or the check to be cut or those types of things? How are you, when someone calls in saying they're a customer and they need to reset their password, how are you verifying that's actually that person?
Yep.
Right? Having some of those common sense processes in place is super important. And then backups, right? Like things will go wrong. And whether it's accidental or it's from an attack, you've got to be able to know that you've got fresh enough, assets and data and all that stuff that you can recover. And it doesn't just stop at making sure those backups are there. You got to practice the recovery and do it once every few months. But know if something happens, you get hit with ransomware, something like that happens, who's gonna recover it, how that works, where it is, all that stuff, and it's working.
Those are such great steps, and I think it would be true regardless of size. I mean, regardless of size of the organization. So, define your ideal client, and then just tell us where the best place to find you online.
Sure. Yeah. So we are best at helping the C-suite. So your owners, your CEOs, the small companies, CTOs, folks like that, inside organizations with less than 100 employees usually. So we want you to get started early, and there's lots of very good reasons too. And you're working usually in a highly sensitive, targeted, or regulated industry like finance, healthcare, education, manufacturing. Those types of places have significant and increasing in enforcement regulations, right? For good reason, and you're going to get
an exposure,
an exposure. You don't have a security team, which none of us probably do, right? So we can help you train for this practice inside your company and upskill your whole team so that you can continue to mature the protections in place as a team and not have to pay for those huge expensive contractors until much later.
Right.
Again, I'm really serious about the protecting other founders thing. So you can find us at havocshield.com. There's a trial there. It's an affordable platform, but customer or not, we want to help answer questions and help people through sticky security situations. So just email me. It's Brian, Brian at havocshield.com.
Havocshield.com. Well, Brian, we will make sure that that's in the show notes, the website. And if you don't mind, email me the link to the article that you think is, it's kind of what you outlined here. It sounds like at the end, but if there's specific steps that we can add to the show notes, that article, we would love to. And
absolutely.
Man, we just thanks again for taking time on this Friday afternoon to just kind of share the story of Havoc Shield and really just helping our listeners kind of think through some things that are just so pertinent and germane to what they're dealing with every day and the exposure that their companies have, and really just playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Brian, thanks again. Have a great weekend.
Thanks a ton, Kevin. You too.
Another episode in the books. We hope you heard some great takeaways. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on iTunes and YouTube. As always, thanks for listening to Rising Tide.